Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Madeline Coons, and I'm the International Director of Communications and Fundraising of the Jesuit Refugee Service. We are honored by your presence for the unveiling of JRS's 2022 Global Annual Report. Present here with me at the Jesuit Curia in Rome are our International Director, Father Tom Smulich, who after 8 years of service will be moving on to the next part of his ministry later this year, and Brother Michael Schupp, our Deputy International Director, who will take on the role of International Director on the 1st of September. We look forward to sharing with you the stories, achievements, and hopes of the people we served together in 2022 and the impact of your generosity. After this event, the annual report will be publicly issued through our website, www.jrs.net. Please feel free to share it with your friends, family, and with anyone else who might be interested in learning more. To conclude this event, we will recognize Father Tom for his 8 years of service and welcome Brother Michael as he shares a few words on the future of JRS. Before we start, allow me to share some technical instructions with you. The event will be simultaneously translated into English, Spanish, and French. You can select your preferred language in your meeting control at the bottom of your screen. Click Interpretation, and then click the language that you would like to hear. You can also go to the top of the screen and select Side by Side in the View Options window. This will allow you to see both any shared video and our photos in the speaker simultaneously. Please turn off your microphones and keep them off for the duration of the event. Finally, kindly note this event is being recorded and streamed publicly on YouTube. Please turn off your camera if you do not wish to be seen. And for those of you here in presence today, please know that we will be taking photos. If you do not wish to be in a photo, please let a member of staff know. And now, let me pass the floor to Father Tom, who will walk us through the main highlights of our global work last year.
Madeline, thank you for that welcome and for inviting all of us who are here today. Thank you all, those of you who are online around the world, and those of you present who braved the Roman heat to make it to the aula here at the Curia of the Society of Jesus. Thanks to everyone for making what we did in 2022 possible. Without your accompaniment of those that we accompany, what we're sharing today in the annual report could not have happened. As I am wont to say here in Rome, molte grazie, grazie mille for your support. A couple of slides to help me and you guide through this brief introduction to the annual report. Last year, we were privileged to accompany and serve over 1.5 million people around the world. We did that in 58 different countries, and we were blessed by financial support of about $94 million. Let me talk about each of those briefly. That 1.5 million is a significant number of women, men, and children throughout the world. It's a significant increase from last year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. Those 58 countries, again, represent different parts of the world. We started in Zimbabwe. We finished our work in Zimbabwe, where we began in 1990. We handed over our work in Tongagara Camp to the Diocese of Mutare at the end of 2022. And this year we returned to Ukraine for the reasons that all of us know so well. And that income of 94 million, the generosity of individuals, governments, foundations, the Catholic Church community, church communities from various denominations all over the world, the Jesuit network and Jesuits themselves. Thank you all for making our work possible. The second slide is also part of your annual report. It breaks down the areas where of the types of service that we were able to offer. As I said, there's growth this year. 56,000 people that we accompanied in and out of Ukraine because of the disaster there. Some of this growth is also because we were back in the field in 2022. Rather than simply doing things online, we could teach again, we could do meetings again. In particular, the numbers of people who benefited, who were involved in our reconciliation work, tripled, more than tripled, to 95,000. And part of that growth is because of what you helped us do. New partners, new initiatives, new opportunities to accompany people in meeting the needs that forced displacement has brought on them. We're not a random growth machine. I've always been, as I say, agnostic about getting bigger. But as you may have heard this week on World Refugee Day, it was announced that there are 108.4 million forcibly displaced people in the world. Our commitment, our accompaniment with and to them demands that we grow where the need is great and where JRS can make a difference. The third slide is my photo gallery. You're going to see a lot of photos in the annual report, but these are some of the photos of my annual report, which we'll touch on later in this time together. Moving from left, that's me with the young women of the Naweza Project in Dzaleka refugee camp in Malawi. Naweza means yes, I can. And Malawi is one of those places that has fallen off the map. Places like Myanmar, where conflict goes on, or Syria, which remains in a sort of arrested state of conflict, to the Congolese who continue to come to Malawi as I speak. These young women in Naweza are part of a leadership and scholarship program there, allowing them to get high school and bachelor degrees in a future that they might not have otherwise imagined. And that picture is a testament to the gender supportive work that we are doing throughout JRS. Our gender responsive education work is a priority for what we do. And as an example of the 170,000 folks that we educated in Chad last year, 61% were girls and women. And you may have seen that number of 187,000 people served by MHPSS, psychosocial services. 63% of them were women and girls. I'm proud that we have made this ongoing development and priority of women and girls and their protection needs a hallmark of what we were able to do in 2022. That second picture is of me, and I was with our senior leadership team, two of whom you'll meet later, our regional directors, on the Colombia-Venezuela border. You'll hear more about the Yukpa people from Madeline and more about our work with indigenous peoples later in the program. But I had the grace, the privilege to celebrate Mass with them. I think the first time anyone had celebrated Mass with them since they were forced to flee Venezuela. It was an experience of what Pedro Arrupe wanted JRS to be. Wanted JRS to offer a service that was human, pedagogical, and spiritual. And that final picture is from Romania, where I visited our work receiving Ukrainian refugees. Our staff has more than tripled in response to that crisis, and many of those new members are Ukrainians themselves. That picture there, it's hanging on our wall in the office. It's hands joining in the colors of the flags of Romania and Ukraine. And let me just tell you one of my favorite stories of the year. A woman named Anastasia, the head of our teaching group. We are helping young people get adjusted to the Romanian school system. And so we're doing some language work with them as well. She's the head of the group, and I ran into her. She was off on her way to school, and she said, "Thank you for letting us teach. Thank you for treating us as human beings. We don't want to be treated as refugees." For her to be treated as a refugee meant to be excluded, left out, and marginalized. And there in Romania, and I believe around the world in those 58 countries, we welcome our forcibly displaced brothers and sisters with dignity. And I'm tremendously proud of that at the end of 2022. So for my final slide is the title of our annual report, Hope Makes the Difference. So I was sitting in the comms office a few months ago discussing what the annual report title would be. And we were kind of talking about hope makes a difference. And I said, no. The difference, the difference. Hope is the necessary foundation of the work that we do as JRS, as a ministry of the Society of Jesus. Hope is the foundation of why people have the courage to leave and why they continue to move forward in spite of challenges and difficulties that few of us can imagine. Hope is what it's all about. Hope is what brings us together today. Hope makes the difference. Thank you all for making that hope possible in 2022. And I hope you will enjoy the rest of our survey of JRS around the world this past year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for walking us through everything of the highlights of what we did last year. And thank you to all of you who made that possible. If you have any questions, if you'd like to make any comments, or if you have any feedback, for those of you online, please leave your messages in the chat and we will follow up with you afterwards via email. For those of you who are here with us in person, we look forward to speaking with you and answering any of your questions in the garden afterwards. To deepen our reflection on our work in 2022, we must start with our response to the Ukraine crisis. Thanks to your support, JRS has been at the forefront of the humanitarian response, both in Ukraine and in neighboring countries, providing immediate and long-term support to accompany those forced to flee their homes, recounting the impact of the work we have done and continue to do. We have a video testimony from Lesia, a young student who found refuge with us in Lviv. Let's watch it together now.
Мені 13 років. Я навчаюся у школі, у 8 класі вже майже закінчила, залишився місяць. Я з міста Покровськ, Донецької області. Кави їде погуляти і в Ілліному парці, наприклад, або біля школи в нас є майданчик там. Зараз я навчаюсь онлайн. Я хочу вивчити до кінця англійський язик. Дуже хочу вивчити. Я з 1 класу, мені він дуже подобався, але зараз я розумію, що він мені все-таки потрібен. І я хочу ще зробити собі стрижку. В класі ми дуже хотілося стати врачем, доктором. Потім в 6 класі я Дуже хотіла бути ветеринаром. У 7 класі мені взагалі поліція подобалася. Зараз я в роздумі. Ну, як сказати, мені було дуже весело. Там знаходиться половина моїх друзів, там дуже цікаво. Але я з ними все одно спілкуюся через Viber, Instagram, по відеочату, все одно. З класу майже половина залишилася вдома, в нашому рідному місті. Вони кажуть, не будуть виїжджати. Я також не дуже хотіла виїжджати. Було страшно, але все одно. Дома краще. У всіх добре, дома краще. Таки домой хочу. Додому повернутися дуже хочеться.
We continue to look at the Ukrainian crisis, but from a different vantage point. I'm honored to introduce Bianca Albu, who has been working as a project coordinator at JRS Romania since 2009. Bianca has been a dedicated legal counselor for over 18 years and is involved in the development of programs aimed at accompanying and providing integration pathways for migrants, refugees, and those most vulnerable. When war broke out in Ukraine, JRS Romania reacted immediately, expanding its work and offering support to Ukrainians arriving in the country. Bianca and her team welcomed me and other colleagues recently to visit with them and Ukrainians living in Romania so that we might hear and feel firsthand the new set of obstacles they're forced to endure to keep their children safe and provide basic education. Not only were Ukrainian children forced out of the classroom during COVID, but the war has meant that many of them have never returned. You may notice the pin that all of us are wearing. It was made by love with Ukrainian children we serve in Constanța. Children who want nothing more than to go back home, be with their families, and go to school. Bianca, I leave the word to you.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. It is both an honor and a joy to be here with us, and thank you for all your support. Indeed, last year has been a year totally different than any others when we have served the refugees in Romania. It has been not only challenging, but also full of gratitude. We were grateful for meeting each of the refugees we were serving, and last year we have served a population of almost 40,000 people. Most of them were coming from Ukraine, but we never left anyone aside. Our services were dedicated since the first day to all people who were crossing the border. We were inspired by Pedro Arrupe, and we jumped in since day one. And we tried to provide accommodation and livelihoods and support for their daily needs, legal assistance, psychosocial support, health, and a lot of other activities that were needed and which we identified step by step together with the community. Since the very beginning, we made sure that people were accommodated in safe spaces in the network of the Catholic community and also in a hotel that we have rented. In the same place, in the hotel and at our offices, we have offered the opportunity to attend psychological support groups and psychological sessions, as well as a lot of therapies for both adults and children. That is because most of the population was women and children, and they were all terrified, and they were all trying to adjust to this new reality. And how better to do it together with them other than being side by side every day. Therefore, we have created new activities that were dedicated to them, which were, for example, art therapy with a lot of crafting workshops and painting and therapy dogs, to specialized services offered by the competent teams we have gathered around us. And when I mean team, I mean Romanians and Ukrainians. Now we have collaboration with psychologists and therapists who are coming from Ukraine, who are themselves refugees, but who put themselves at the service of the others. So what better example can we see than their dedication and effort? We have indeed increased from 30 staff members at the beginning of last year to almost 180 staff members towards the end of the year. And this was possible because we have accompanied and served a very resourceful community. And together we have managed to offer all the services that were needed and all the services that were required by the people we were helping. I was mentioning the safe environment accommodation, the safe spaces we have created at our offices, and also in the educational centers we have developed. Together with partners, we reach more than 23 places where Ukrainian children can attend educational courses, either kindergarten or schools, and they are served by Ukrainian refugees who act as teachers, by psychologists, and also by Romanian language teachers. We have seen how much they need our support, our understanding, and day by day, we've grown and we've learned together how to better handle this situation in which we were all out of the sudden terrified. We are grateful for all your support, and words cannot measure how much we thank you for all you have done in all these months that were very difficult and that were indeed filled with gratitude for every encounter we have made. Thank you again.
Thank you, Bianca. And thank you for being a friendly smile, a loving friend, and for all you do to lift up our teams and those we serve. We will now hear from Danielle Vela, JRS's Reconciliation Program Manager. Danielle has been with JRS for over 20 years and leads our work in reconciliation as we strive to build bridges and create spaces of hospitality and welcome for refugees, as well as their host communities within JRS teams around the world. Danielle is running a series of workshops in Syria, and due to the unstable connection while she's there, we'll be viewing a recording of her words that she wanted to share with all of you. Over to you, Danielle.
Hello. I'm talking from the island of Malta, where a few weeks ago I was asked to give a presentation to an ecumenical group of visitors about migration in the footsteps of St. Paul. And this is where I start now, from a story in the Bible written thousands of years ago, about St. Paul being washed up on our shores after being shipwrecked. St. Paul was on his way to Rome to face trial on charges of religious and political crimes. So he could have been regarded with suspicion. And yet we read how he was welcomed with unusual kindness by people who rushed to help him. And when St. Paul and his friends left the island after some time, the people gave them all they needed to continue their journey, indicating that strong relationships of friendship had been made. Now, beyond the charity, the way that the people welcomed St. Paul was remarkable for something else, because they were open to Paul, to the man he was and the message he brought. And so they allowed themselves to be transformed, to receive the gifts of healing and new life he offered. They received at least as much from Paul as they gave, a mutuality of exchange, albeit at different levels of need. What a massive difference between that welcome and the way refugees are greeted now, not only in Malta, but all around the world. A world that both creates and rejects refugees at an increasingly alarming rate. Now, that states build walls to keep refugees out doesn't surprise anybody. But unfortunately, the hostility also comes from other quarters, like some in local communities, where the refugees go to seek protection. What are we doing about this? Our mission is to accompany, serve, advocate for refugees so they may thrive and live life to the full. But this is not something that we, neither JRS nor the refugees, can do alone. As human beings, we are created to live in community, where we may belong, participate, and actualize our potential. This is really difficult for refugees who go to seek asylum in foreign communities, where they appear as the stranger, and where many times they find closed doors. So we do all we can so that refugees do not remain strangers. How? By encouraging what many in the local communities are already doing to welcome refugees, by co-creating spaces of mutuality and encounter, something like what St. Paul experienced, a warmth and openness of welcome that offers the chance not only of survival, but of fullness of humanity, both for those who are receiving the help and those who are giving it. We're talking about creating spaces of connection, where refugees and locals can accompany one another, share their stories, and where refugees may participate on an equal footing. This is one way we do the work of reconciliation, which for us is very much about relationships, a vision of creating right relationships that are based on our fundamental values of solidarity, compassion, and justice. Now, this is all easier said than done, especially when it comes to engaging with those who are fearful of refugees and hostile, when it comes to listening to narratives we'd rather not hear, because they repeat fake news and stereotypes about refugees, and also because they alert us to needs amongst the local communities that we can't do much about. But we do need to have these conversations, not least because we expect the hosts to listen to refugees in their turn. Recently, I gave a workshop to our team in JRS UK, and one person put it brilliantly. She said, and she's a refugee herself, she said, we need to go where the hostility is. This is really not easy. And in what we do, we're inspired, as always, by the words of Pope Francis, who said, we should not be afraid of our differences, but afraid of the close-mindedness and prejudice that can prevent us from truly encountering one another on all sides. Enacting reconciliation and justice in communities looks different from place to place. One of the stories in the annual report is from Dollo Ado, a place in the Somali region of Ethiopia, where we work with Somali refugees in camps and their neighboring communities. We've chosen there to support their traditional reconciliation committees, composed mostly of elders, of clan leaders, religious leaders, whose task is to resolve conflicts and incidents of violence, sometimes very serious, in their communities. An evaluation has shown us that our intervention has had an impact on the quality of decision-making taken by these committees. They try to listen more to both sides. They don't automatically leap to the defense of their clan. They try to go to the heart of the matter, and they pay much more attention to cases of gender-based violence involving the woman, which before they used to discard as a matter for NGOs. Of course, much work remains to be done, but this example shows something that we really try to do, which is to be attentive to the faith and culture of the communities where we go, not just to impose what we think that they should do. To learn about each context, we conduct assessments and of what is driving conflict, what is driving peace. We listen a lot to the stories that people tell. And we've learned to be very aware, critically aware of the destructive use of storytelling, which makes enemies of those we judge to be different from us in ways we find unpalatable, unacceptable, and fearful. And this is something we witness also amongst refugees themselves in every setting where we do reconciliation work. And this arises from identity differences. Could be differences based on ethnicity, religion, clan, nationality. These differences being exploited to create superiority, inferiority divides, to justify discrimination. Many times the refugees bring these divides with them from back home, where they've been deepened by shared histories of violence and war. When we're working with such deep division, sometimes we just start from the building blocks, from just tolerating each other's presence, coexisting without violence, and with such groups, even accepting to sit in the same room for a dialogue is an indicator of progress in itself. One of the guiding principles of our work in reconciliation is to put our shared humanity first, before any social distinction, before any difference of identity. During the most recent bout of civil war in Ethiopia, which ended with a peace agreement late last year, we used to hold spaces for commemoration for our teams, to mourn every single victim killed in the war, whoever they were. We mourn them equally. This was an important ritual for our teams who come from different identity backgrounds. Now, why do I share this? Because it shows that reconciliation starts from each one of us. We all need healing. We all need reconciliation. And it starts with our teams, who are microcosms of their local contexts. By the time you listen to this presentation, I'll be in Syria, working with our teams there. And I want to share what someone from our community building team in Aleppo told me the last time I went. I said, before I used to look at the person's religion or gender or the place they were coming from. And sometimes I used to just cancel their viewpoint. But after JRS, I've started to look at the person as a human being. The most important thing is to accept the other. But they cautioned me, this is a long journey. It will take 40 years. We need a generation to fix this. And this rings true of all the reconciliation work we do. No quick fixes. And sometimes this goes against the humanitarian organization mentality. And we need to learn to live with this. We've also learned that this reconciliation work needs new kinds of evaluation to chart the small steps of progress. And we also have started to look for what a colleague in India calls a consistency that creates a ripple effect. What I'd like to say lastly is that these ripple effects are felt not only in the communities we serve and our teams, but in us as an organization as well, in the quality of relationships and processes we have at every level of the organization and between them too. Our reconciliation really prompts us to look at how we do what we do. And this is so important. Thank you to the members of our advisory group and to our resource persons from different backgrounds who have helped us to enrich our shared journey to reconciliation. And last but not least, a big thank you to our teams, without whom, of course, this journey to the fullness of humanity would not be possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Thank you for your inspiring words. We're gratified to see how JRS's reconciliation work is making a lasting difference in the communities we serve. Moving forward, I'd like to introduce you to Yadar Hanur Komi, a refugee from Sudan who has been living in Kakuma refugee camp for 10 years. His story was recorded last year, yet it is sadly so very relevant today. Yadar would like to return to his home country, but as we have seen recently, the civil unrest forces him and so many others like him to build a life elsewhere. You and JRS are there to accompany them.
The first thing I would like to say thank you to the JRS department for maybe uplifting us and being the current person as I am. My name is Jadami Anur Kum. I am 25 years old. The country of my origin is Northern Sudan or Sudan. I flight in the year 2012 and my arrival in Kakuma is the month of January 2013. I left Sudan because of the crisis of the conflict that took place. Some of us, we are looking, maybe you look for where to settle yourself so that you find a better life, where you can further your studies, whether you can get safety of life and the other things that maybe helps to continue with life. Hopefully, when the country is in peace, we will go back. But if it continues in the same situation, then there's no hope for going in a country like this one. Life in Kakuma is just kind of a struggle, but we thank God because we are able to breathe. And after that, we have even acquired some knowledge that maybe skills that we are able to cut off our needs. But life is, though there are a lot of challenges that we cannot go into it, but we call it life. And at JRS, I really benefited from the program of social entrepreneurship, of which is community business development, that impact us with some knowledge of which we are able to utilize. Because after joining the course, we were given some insights on how to start business and maybe on how to run the business and keep some kind of accounts, which it is really benefiting. And we really appreciate the organization for the input they offer. We were advised by the lecturer that, you can start, you can give it a test, and I came and gave it a test. Though it was kind of struggle between lose and success, but all has gone well. The kind of business I have, as you can see, is just a kind of retail shop. Here we sell diverse of items. And maybe we go on for sugar, we go on for all of these things, whichever things that go fast, okay, so that we sustain life. But it's going on well. These are just fellow colleagues that who help me to maybe run the business in case I'm away, and in case I am not within the shop, they can take part and maybe save. Out of it, you can pay them at the end of the month, or they get out of whatever. I wish the knowledge that I have, whenever I maybe repatriate back home or somewhere, can have the same skills, the knowledge, so that I can start my own business and flip myself in a good manner. The youth need to be impacted with the knowledge of going to school, maybe obtain whatever, but out of whatever that we do, you can be skillful and open a small business, of which will reduce dependence on other activities, but rather depend on yourself. I am grateful for the knowledge that they have given me. We really thank the organization.
Thank you, Yadar. It's now my pleasure to welcome Jeffrey Shikuku, who has many years of experience in education and emergencies and has served as Inter-Regional Education Coordinator for JRS Eastern Africa and Southern Africa regions from 2018 up to earlier this year, when he took on the role of Country Director of JRS Kenya. Jeffrey, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tim. And it's yet another time for us to celebrate the success we've seen in the year 2022. But this has been a long-term investment for us to get where we are. But first, I wanted to recognize that displacement causes, especially children and youth, a couple of vulnerabilities. And this could be coupled by the fact that they come with gender inequalities. There could be disability exclusions. They may have trauma. We could have conflicts like what Daniela has referred to. We could have children coming unaccompanied, but JRS comes in to give hope and stabilize and restore what has been lost during displacement. And education becomes one of the first protection that every child needs at the point of displacement. So our education programming and livelihood is supposed to give hope to the displaced children and also the youth. The story you've just heard from Yadam is an example of programming that meets the need of the people we serve by providing them opportunities and skills that then give them hope tomorrow. But I'll again be speaking to another success case about Abrahman Mariam, who is a teacher, an early childhood teacher in Kakuma, undergoing our teacher training program. But I want to say that all these successes can only be attributed to how JRS is doing things in a new way. I must say that JRS has shifted and programming more based on evidence. Previous speakers have spoken about assessments that determine the programming that we do to make sure that it meets the needs of the people we serve. The other aspect is that we've given the people we serve a voice in the work we do. So we listen to them. When we are designing education programs, we listen more to the stakeholders, to the parents, to the children, so that we structure our education programs to meet their needs. And I must say that has made us achieve more than if we thought for them. So they are involved in the program design. They help us implement and even monitor. You could notice, for example, in Kenya, that out of the teachers we have, close to 60% are refugee teachers, meaning that we are allowing refugees to participate in our programming. The other aspect I must say is that we have involved integrated programming in our education programming, in the sense that we don't want to lose, for example, investments made in education by not making sure that education does not lead to any form of livelihood later on. And this led to JRS to merge the two pillars that we had, education and livelihood, in one, so that we are able to see the impact of the investment we put in education, seeing how it leads to a livelihood or changing life of the people we serve. We have come up with an approach that has made sure that after a child completed, be it primary or secondary education, they get to a livelihood program. And within that, we guide them to choose careers, we guide them to choose skills, training based on their capacity, but also looking at the market that could be existing. In that sense, we have that approach we are calling Pathfinder approach that ensures that all through this journey, we are accompanying the child or we are accompanying the youth in the entire journey, so that we are able to see the impact that our investment leads to. Speaking about Mariam Abdrahman, an ECD teacher in Kakuma, who has been trained in an education a certificate program that is nationally recognized in Kenya, meaning that at the end of her course, she is as equally qualified like any other Kenyan teacher. In that sense, I'm speaking about national inclusion of refugees into national systems. So our programming in the education program, he is making sure that whatever education program we design is aligned to the national system. And we continue to advocate that for sustainability, the national government includes refugees instead of us continuing to run parallel education programs in that particular context. I would speak about a man who has taken an early childhood education program, a certificate course, but along the way, the government shifted and insisted that every teacher needed to have a diploma. JRS had then to plan and make sure that many other teachers we had trained, not only Mariam, joined the diploma teacher training program to make sure that our teachers are actually certified and can be recognized by the government, so that when they are included later on and the government could say they want to employ them, they have the right qualifications to compete for jobs that are available like any other Kenyan. The other approach we use in our education program is making sure that we are offering a holistic support to the people we serve. And this is speaks a lot to our mission where we talk about accompaniment, meaning that we just don't, for example, give a child education. We accompany them, recognizing the other challenges I had mentioned, making sure that, for example, mental health and psychosocial support becomes part of our education program, appreciating that when a child is displaced or a teacher is displaced, they come with the burden of trauma. And with that burden, we cannot succeed in offering education programming without making sure we holistically include mental health and psychosocial support. Daniela has spoken about reconciliation, which is another aspect we integrate within our education program to make it whole, so that the population we serve is reconciled, but the child we serve is equally reconciled as an individual. In our livelihood programs, another aspect we look at is some of our beneficiaries are mothers. How do we make sure that that does not exclude them from our program? We come up with interventions that make sure if they are mothers and they come to benefit from our program, we make the environment safe for the child, but also for the mother by, for example, having creche within our livelihood programming. In our tertiary programming, we make sure, for example, that if one of our beneficiaries may be lacking rent or maybe having medical conditions, are we able to support and accompany them to make sure that they tend to concentrate more on what they have come to do? So generally, I would say that education protects the child, livelihood restores hope, and that is what we endeavor in our programming to make sure that we change people's lives, give them hope, but also protect their future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joffrey. Thank you for sharing your testimony of the impact that our work has on the lives of refugees as they strive to build a better future for themselves and for their families. Efforts like these showcase the importance advocacy plays in the JRS mission, allowing for the voices of refugees to be amplified so that they may be heard. To give an example, I would like to share a personal experience of advocacy in action. Twice a year, our senior leadership team gathers to discuss the strategic direction of JRS. In November 2022, we met in Colombia. Colombia has the second largest population of internally displaced people and is one of the countries housing the largest numbers of refugees in the world, totaling around 5 million. These numbers, they each carry their own name, face, and story of displacement. During last year's meeting, we were fortunate enough to visit Cucuta and the surrounding area on the Venezuelan border. The Simón Bolívar Bridge, linking Venezuela and Colombia, sees almost 20,000 people per day. Those who cross the bridge often head north, seeking safety and a way to provide for their families, often carrying with them little to nothing but hope for a better future. We took the opportunity to walk with some of them. On the same visit, we met with the Yucca people, who are an indigenous Venezuelan community now living across the border in Colombia. They've been displaced by one of the worst humanitarian crises we've seen in decades, and is still ongoing today. We learned about the many ways they and other indigenous communities have come together to preserve their way of life and prosper as a society. But most importantly, with your help, we've added the sharing of conversations on reconciliation and tools for advocacy of their rights. With you, JRS is aided in bringing these communities together across the region to ensure basic necessities, information, and most importantly, the sharing of stories and mutual understanding so that they can be represented at their local, national, and transnational politics. In a moment, you will see a video of a community leader from the Alto Pajaucus Awayun Reservation, where indigenous communities are often forced to participate in illicit trade to remain secure on the land. Binational communities such as these, whom we work with alongside our Jesuit networks supporting migrants and refugees in the region and all throughout Latin America, represent the survival of land protection and preservation. Milton Hulan Donkit will be sharing his story with you now. But before that, I wanted to close with my most sincere thanks. Thank you for making the telling of his story possible and for prioritizing his needs and the needs of others like him across the world.
Mi nombre es Milton Julón Canquit. Nací en la comunidad de Alto Pupuntas, que es una comunidad anexa a esta comunidad titular de Alto Pajacus. Tengo mi esposa, soy padre de familia, tengo 2 hijos. Cumplo una función importante dentro de mi comunidad, soy secretario general de la comunidad. En la actualidad me dedico específicamente a lo que es la agricultura en el campo, en una agricultura familiar. Gracias a los talleres nosotros hemos podido despertar, hemos podido ver perspectivas que hay posibilidades a cambiar. Hemos podido también conocer bastante lo que son nuestros derechos como pueblos indígenas a través de esas capacitaciones, a conocer nuestros beneficios también como comunidades indígenas, las ventajas y desventajas, las potencialidades, las problemáticas, las necesidades. O sea, esos talleres han ayudado bastante a nosotros como comunidad y gracias a los talleres, la comunidad, desde los talleres a la actualidad, los participantes, hemos ido transmitiendo esta información a la población y veo que hay un cambio, tal vez no de actividades físicas, pero al menos de mentalidad. Tenemos muchos planes a nivel de comunidad de mejorar en el futuro, ¿no? Las principales necesidades que nosotros como comunidades indígenas aquí en la comunidad del Pajacus, sacando una lista, serían varias, ¿no? Como por ejemplo, la principal, la comunicación. También tenemos la necesidad urgente de la infraestructura educativa. Tenemos un colegio pero que no tiene infraestructura, ya tenemos resolución. La otra necesidad es el puesto de salud. La otra necesidad es implementar, ¿no?, de parte del gobierno local proyectos productivos, ya que sufrimos bastante con el problema de desnutrición crónica en la comunidad. Sería necesario e importante para la mejora en la calidad alimenticia, la soberanía alimentaria en este pueblo de la comunidad de Alto Pajacus. Las necesidades que tenemos en esta comunidad, a través de los talleres hemos podido ver que de alguna u otra manera se va a encontrar alguna solución. Tenemos esa sensación de que nosotros en el futuro vamos a poder encontrar respuestas. Encuentros es la primera institución, ONG, que se hace presente en esta comunidad, a darnos capacitaciones en el sentido de ver nuestras necesidades, ver las problemáticas y de acuerdo a ello también buscar alternativas de solución. Nunca se hicieron presentes otras instituciones con ese espacio de capacitar, ver nuestras problemáticas, sensibilizarnos, ¿no? O sea, no con ese sentido, no con ese concepto. Uno de los impactos que han dado los talleres a nivel de la comunidad, entre hombres, mujeres y niños, es uno, el rescatar los derechos fundamentales de la mujer, por ejemplo. O sea, Encuentros ha enseñado y ha sensibilizado bastante a mí personalmente. Me ha enseñado de que las mujeres tienen las mismas capacidades, los mismos derechos, los mismos deberes, los mismos sentimientos que un varón. Hemos aprendido sinceramente a valorar con más sentido, con más fuerza, lo que es el sentido del trabajo compartido entre varón y mujer. Inclusive nuestros hijos, nuestros niños cumplen un rol importante en nuestro hogar. Entonces hemos entrado a este espacio de dinamizar mejor las actividades y los roles dentro de un hogar, ¿no?
With Milton's testimony, we close this part of today's event. We will be sending the link to the now public JRS annual report via email very soon. Please, please share it widely. Our thanks to all of you, our friends, supporters, global staff, for making our mission possible. Unfortunately, the reality of increasing global displacement will continue into the near future. But thanks to you, we will be present. We will be accompanying our refugee brothers and sisters and ensuring that hope continues to make all the difference. Let's take a few minutes now to say thank you and arrivederci to Father Tom for his 8 years as international director, and to welcome Brother Michael, who will be leading JRS come September. We've asked 2 members of the JRS senior leadership team to say a few words today. Let me first introduce Oscar Calderon, who has been with JRS since 2010, first as a local coordinator on the Colombian-Venezuela border, and for the last 4 years, he's been the regional director for Latin America and the Caribbean. We have a video message from him.
Hola a todos y a todas, un saludo especial desde la Oficina Regional de JRS para América Latina y el Caribe, desde Bogotá, en Colombia. Hoy es un día para agradecer a cada uno de quienes hacen posible la misión de JRS en el mundo. Ese acompañar, servir y defender se haga vida en medio de tantos sufrimientos, de los gozos, de las fatigas, de las esperanzas, de los refugiados, de los desplazados, de los migrantes forzosos. Pero también hoy es un día para agradecer la vida y la vocación del padre Tony Moras, de estos 8 años de liderazgo en la oficina internacional, 8 años de confianza, 8 años de construir un horizonte para JRS. Tuve la grata oportunidad de conocer al padre Tom en 2015. Recién iniciaba su trabajo como director internacional del JRS en Cúcuta, donde me desempeñaba como coordinador del equipo local en la frontera colombo-venezolana. En aquella ocasión pude descubrir en su sonrisa, en su mensaje de esperanza, en su capacidad para escuchar a los refugiados y a los equipos, a una persona con un profundo sentido de la misión de JRS, del compromiso del trabajo con los refugiados y de la escucha por los equipos, de las personas que conformamos la misión de JRS. Hace 4 años tengo el honor de compartir de cerca junto a él y a todo el equipo de liderazgo global de JRS. Y ha sido una oportunidad para confirmar lo que vi y lo que conocí de su persona y de su honda convicción por este trabajo en el 2015. Gracias, Padre Tom, por confiar en los laicos y en las laicas. Yo he sentido su confianza, su respaldo, su apoyo para que pueda vivir también mi vocación como cristiano, comprometido en esta causa del trabajo con los refugiados, los migrantes y los desplazados forzosos. Gracias también por su hondo compromiso con JRS, por identificar y reconocer el origen, la inspiración del Padre Arrupe, el carisma fundacional e intentar desde el discernimiento y el liderazgo colaborativo con otros y otras, el actualizar esa misión a los retos y los desafíos que viven los refugiados en el mundo presente. Gracias por construir juntos un horizonte común para llevar a JRS al siguiente nivel, confiados en que tenemos una forma particular, desde la escucha atenta y respetuosa, de caminar junto a los refugiados y construir con ellos un futuro esperanzador para todos. Gracias, gracias, gracias. Y también agradecer ahora a Michael por asumir esta misión y recoger las banderas que llevamos construyendo colaborativamente para JRS Global. Infinitas gracias a todos y a todas. Tom, éxitos y buen camino para lo que sigue en tu ministerio, en la compañía. Seguro que la vida y los caminos nos seguirán cruzando en esta misión de acompañar, servir y defender.
Oscar, muchas gracias. Your words are felt on this side of the ocean as well. Sentiment as well. Thank you, Tom. We now pass the floor to Andre Atsu. Andre has been with JRS for over 16 years, first in South Sudan, then in Burundi, and for the last 4 years as Regional Director of Eastern Africa. Andre, over to you.
Thank you, Madeleine. Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Giving testimony to Tom is a difficult task because you don't know, you can start talking from morning to evening. And as I was sharing with one person, every time I have to change my story because I don't know which one fits better, but all of them do. I have had a privilege to have worked with Tom for many years. Since he came as international directors. And this has been a very privileged and a great moment for me. Personally, this has built me as a person and as a GRS staff member. I will be talking, saying Tom is this, but I think given 2 or 3 moments of my encounter with him will best summarize all the testimony that I wanted to talk about. One was during his visit to Eastern Africa in 2016. That time I remember I was a regional HR, and Tom, as one of his signature, visiting the field, trying to be with people where action is, went to visit a place in Upper Nile in southern South Sudan called Maban. He had gone to visit with the then regional director. And during the visit, behold, the war broke out and he hasn't finished his mission. What do we do in this case? You have your international director, you have your regional director who are stuck somewhere where even we don't know what is going to happen. They cannot fly to Juba, then proceed. So I had to organize an evacuation, immediate evacuation for him and the team who were stuck there. And during the process, he hasn't finished his mission there. So I was like, will he accept to come out? I know how Phil is something very dear to him. Will he agree? Will he say, no, I've come to do a mission, allowed me to finish? But one of the things that struck me, he said, Andre, you are my boss. I follow what you tell me to do. That's really struck me and say, wow, he's down to earth. And he also makes sure that what people tell him to do, he has to do. And for me, that was a very special encounter. And that's not the embodiment of the principle of subsidiarity, giving space to people to do what they ought to do. And for me, this is one characteristic that always strikes me in Tom. He tells you, you are my boss. When I come to here, to your area, tell me what to do, and I will follow the instruction. And this builds a person. This gives courage to a person. The second story I want to share is when I was a country director in Burundi, there was always, as it is at times, issues within the team or in the country. So I had a very special encounter, not a positive one, with the staff in the team. And here I was stuck. I don't know where to move to or what to do. And it was just striking to see Tom taking his phone all the way from Rome, calling me and saying, Andre, I know what is happening. I trust in you. Take courage. We will sort it out. We will overcome it. Again, this is for me a special moment, getting the trust of my leader, getting the trust of my boss, saying, take courage, know what to do. For me was really a special moment. And those are the characteristics of any leader. Trust, encouragement, making sure that a person you have put to do his work should do what he ought to do. And the third, which I think is not only encounter for me, but for the whole organization, is the institutional strengthening or the organizational strengthening process that GRS has embarked on the past years. For me, this is what I will call the signature of Tom. And this is based from his personal encounter, his personal experience, starting in Goma or in Masisi, Eastern DRC, seeing the reality of people we serve, seeing the reality of our program, seeing the reality of people who attend to the people we serve. All this helped him to say, we need to do something in GRS to be able to be agile and attend to the need of the people we have called to serve. We need to do something to be able to bring this hope that make the difference to the people we are called to serve. And from this organizational strengthening process, today I will say we are able to be doing or to be able to raise the number we are going to highlight now, because GRS embarked on this process of transformation. And for us to do this, it is because there is a compassion deep down in Tom, compassion in seeing that we have to serve the need and bring this hope. Definitely, this didn't come on a silver plate. There has been a moment of challenges. There has been a moment of pain. but this moment didn't put Tom down. He was able to come over it. He was also able to listen. His original plan is not what we are implementing today. He was able to listen and adjust, and this is what a true leader is about. So as we are giving testimony to talk, I want to say thank you. Thanks for your compassion. Thanks for the change. Thanks for your love. And thanks for the courage and trust. This is what you have helped me to do. And I will take it as I continue my journey with JRS. And at the same time, I know maybe this may sound wow to Michael, to say, Michael, do not be afraid. We are here to work together. We have journeyed for the past 2 years, and I believe that the mission at hand or the mission ahead is at your grip. So welcome, Michael. We are here to work all together to continue the mission of or the transformation that has happened in the past few years, the mission Arupe gave us to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. I leave the word to you, Tom.
I don't have much else to say. I'm very moved by Oscar and Andre for your words. And I'm very grateful for all that you and all the regional directors over these 8 years, but in particular, all of our staff around the world have been able to do. When somebody tells me, when somebody tells me, and they do tell us, that JRS is close to the people, I'm always grateful to hear that. And I think it's true. Not always, but it's true. And I think our desire to accompany people changes us. And that has certainly been my experience over my 8 years plus with JRS. And both Oscar and Andre have talked about this path that we have been on. It's not about making a better, stronger JRS for whatever reason. It's so that we can walk with people more closely and generously and lovingly throughout the world in what we do. And, you know, I haven't done this. We have done this. We have done it together. And I'm really grateful for the ways that JRS has moved forward on that continuum over these 8 years. So, Andre and Oscar, thanks for your nice words, but thanks to you and thanks to the other RDs and thanks to everybody for together having done what we have done over these 8 years. To accompany, to serve, to advocate in ways that the Lord invites us to do each day, each place, each moment. Molte grazie, grazie mille, muchísimas gracias. Merci beaucoup. Shukran.
Thank you, Tom. You have been
Just one other thing.
yes.
I just want to thank Andre for saying that I take orders. So, staff, you know.
Well, you have been a remarkable leader, a servant leader. Agree. You 9 times out of 10 take orders. Not always. Thank you.
Thank you.
We were very sad to see you leave. We know you will not be far away. But in the same breath, we're thrilled to have Brother Michael as he prepares to take on this new role. Many of you already know Michael well. With the Jesuits, he worked in Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, and Rwanda in the 1990s, and joined JRS Europe in 2005. We served as Deputy Regional Director until 2008, and then as Regional Director until 2014. For the past 2 years, he has been our Deputy International Director, JRS. Welcome. I leave the word to you.
Dear guests, dear friends and companions in the mission, it's very difficult to close such an eventful 1.5 hours. We've visited so many places, and I think everyone went through so many emotions. So how do you bring these things together? And that's what I'm still trying to attempt. So bear with me with 10 minutes or so, and then the garden is near. And I would like to offer 3 concluding thoughts to you. One is really about hope, because it is so central. The second one is for Tom. And the third one is a little bit a kind of a glimpse into the future, or a take on that. So let's go to the first one, the question about hope, which is so central, not only for our annual report, but really also for the mission which we engage in. One thing that has really become clear through all the testimonies we have heard is that hope is not a wish for a distant future. Hope is a deep awareness that changes our present, because we know about the life that God wants to give every one of us. And this is life in abundance. The situations which we visited today show really clearly we live in times of much increased violence and also brutal aggression. Ukraine makes this very clear. We haven't spoken about Myanmar, and there could be many other examples. Afghanistan also being one of them in a new way. Working with refugees makes this very clear. The military regime in Myanmar, I remember this picture, for example, bombs people, their own people, not only once, but twice, 3 times, 4 times, so that they have to leave their home again and again, and education can only take part in ditches. The message that these aggressors give is also a very clear message, and for me it says, you simply have no right to live. If you're not at the disposal of my will, if you don't follow my interests, then your life doesn't really count. You have no life of your own. This is the message of the aggressors that we see today, and we know that this is not true. With every space that we can open up through accompaniment, through education, through advocacy, through food, through psychological first aid, we know this is not true, because we become witnesses to the life that everyone is given to heal and develop as a person. And this engages us in a completely different relationship. This is actually the place where JRS is born. It is not only about refugees, it includes us, and it is a very transformative experience, as Danielle said. We do not only offer much needed services. Being with refugees really engages in a change of perspective. Yes, we can help, but many times, like the refugees, we are not in control of the circumstances that cause so much suffering. We feel the limitations. And we are called to look for a new life with the refugees, for life in abundance. So being with refugees really teaches us about how we want to live a better life, and about the societies that we really want to live in. It's a gift that comes through the encounter. We can offer destitute asylum seekers not only a place to stay, but we can also welcome them in our homes. We can go to visit detainees again and again, just to give a testimony that this is not the future, that a different future is possible. And we can continue the education in Myanmar in the ditches, because we know that is not going to be the last word. It's a very different conception of community compared to a group of persons that just offer services or are good advocates. It's an individual experience, but in JRS, we know about this experience as a group, as friends. And we help each other to understand this experience, to find words, to express and to live it. An experience that through witnessing our brokenness as human beings has made us much more humane and therefore much more open to the divine, to an experience that does not depend on our own or other people's limitations. And this is actually, in my opinion, the spiritual contribution that JRS can make in this world in which we work. The experience of hope does not only speak about a better world, near or far, no? It involves this change of perspective. And because it involves this change of perspectives, it can set free a longing in us, a longing for fulfillment. And we've seen that in many of those videos that actually manifests itself in the joy to live, simply in the joy to live. And therefore, being with refugees, starting from the encounter, for us, I think, is ultimately a journey of love. We can surrender to this journey because it's real. And this is ultimately what brings peace. And therefore, we ask you today, with our new campaign, to become ambassadors of this peace. It is vital for JRS to stay in this dynamic because it remains at the origin of our existence. When we look at the figures that UNHCR presented, those figures paint a grim picture. 108 million forcibly displaced people worldwide, with a plus of 19 million in just 1 year. All the categories of forced displacement are up. JRS is present in all those countries which have the high numbers: Syria, Ukraine, and Afghanistan, Ethiopia, DRC, and Myanmar, and also in many neighboring countries where the people flee. I think of 3 types of situations that can continue to shape our presence in the future, staying in this vital dynamic. The first type really is the most forgotten crisis in the world, where no government or no public has an interest or wants to pay attention. Myanmar is one of them. We also are now able to open a new project in Ture in Mozambique with internally displaced people from the Northeast. They were chased from their land, not because of actual, but because of prospective natural resources to be found on their land. And the government made sure that they cannot return to the land. De facto, they took the land titles. In Afghanistan, we now ask ourselves the question, can we continue the education work under the given circumstances after the edict which was published by the religious authorities about 2 weeks ago? And maybe we have to find other ways and other means of accompaniment. I think it's in these situations, out of the spotlight, where no one wants to look at, that JRS's presence is really needed. The second type are the most long-term refugee situations without an apparent ending, those that seem never to end, where people are de facto born as refugees, in inverted commas, and where they may lead their whole lives with all the limitations that this non-status brings. We have spoken about Kakuma. We believe that education is an excellent investment in the future, that new approaches to livelihoods that connect to the digital world need to be explored, and that local advocacy is vital to improve the situation. Abandoning large populations because of political stalemate, or simply sustaining them, that would be cynical and, in my opinion, betraying hope. And we have many positive examples, not least the ones we saw from Cucuta in Latin America, that show how little it takes in order to bring about a change apart from political will. The second situation, I think, is a second place where JRS should offer this transformative experience. The third one is really where we witness increasingly the vulnerability of people who embark on long journeys in order to seek safety. and where they seek a possibility to survive. I visited Colombia recently. I visited the southern and northern border of Mexico recently, just to witness the toll that these routes take on people. Emergency assistance, legal advice is often available only on the roadside or at some resting points where the journey is interrupted. Having arrived at the US border, people rarely meet with an honest examination of their cause, their history and experiences. Therefore, it's very difficult to accept the outcome of these talks because they don't feel recognized as persons, nor their history is recognized. Instead, they are met with deterrence and bureaucracy deployed by a system of migration management. As JRS, we are present in those situations here and there, and I think we also need to learn how to connect those dots. So much about hope. The thought for Tom is very simple. I want to express my deep gratitude to you, Tom, because I think you have led and built a JRS that allows us today to be present in those situations and to do what JRS needs to do to respond to those challenges. And I wanted to mention just two qualities that I could witness personally in the 2.5 years that we worked together. I have experienced you as someone who is really a model of what we would call in Jesuit talk, cura personalis. You've been a provincial, you know what that is. The way I have witnessed it was you were always ready to listen with love. And that means to the person and not to the problem, which makes a big difference. And by listening to consider the full development and the fulfillment of the person that it is seeking. You have a great ability to create room for everyone to do what he or she could do best, what he or she could best contribute. Thank you very much for that. The second quality has been mentioned by Andre. I think throughout those 8 years as a leader, and I could witness the results, you were able and strongly committed to build a solid organization, which is really what we needed, an organization that can respond to what we are called to do. Many examples have been given. The global systems are one example, no? The same goes for the focus, the thematic focus in education, livelihoods, gender responsive education, advocacy, and reconciliation, which allows us today in really to focus and develop quality responses. I think this is a second very important aspect. And all of that, I think, was possible because of your skill to bring us and to bring JRS in relationships with so many different actors. This inviting side, contribute something to the mission, is very convincing and very engaging. And I think both on this personal side and on the institutional side, you really have been a true model of accompaniment. Many of my colleagues I know share this. They got inspired by it. Donors and partners who want to join the mission. And I think this is sometimes the biggest sign of success, even young Jesuits. JRS, and you also use this phrase, is truly a global ministry of the society. I fully agree with that. In our times, no? We grow from the encounter with refugees and our relationships with them so that we can respond in the most local and sometimes also very isolated places. But then given the history of the Jesuits as an universal religious congregation, and given the universal call that Father Arupe gave us in order to respond to the refugee situation, we actually really do it in a way that recognizes enforced migration, the global and the universal plight for protection. And this is why we need to maximize this dimension. I would like to thank everyone present here in the room and online as well, because there are so many ways you are collaborating with JRS as a volunteer, as a staff member at the front line, as an expert in the back office, as a partner in a think tank or a university, as a donor, as a supportive government, as a group that really identifies with one issue that JRS tries to bring to the forefront and is really, really engaged in this mission. Someone who is in dialogue with us. I think whatever your engagement is, each one of you engages in an experience that helps us to discover hope and therefore hopefully brings us closer to peace. Thank you very much for being these companions here in the room and online. My last and shortest thought is about the organization, because the rest we can continue in the garden. Tom's 8 years, and we've seen that in the numbers also, are a period of extraordinary growth. You mentioned it yourself. The volume of the JRS operations grew in those 8 years from some $40 to $50 million euros worldwide to the 94 that we've heard about. The staff in the international office, so the people who help build the organizational backbone of JRS, who help build expertise in thematic areas, they grew from some 12, 15 to around 40 colleagues today. This is an extraordinary growth. So someone asked the question, what's the limit for JRS's growth? And you come with an MBA, so it's not a good MBA question. And this is why I try to answer it on the occasion. And I want to give this as a perspective, I think, for the future. So what's the limit of the growth for JRS? In my view, really, honestly, the horizon for our work is the growing number of 108 million forcibly displaced people around the world who are in real need of protection. This is the horizon for our growth. And it would feel wrong to me to say, by principle, some of them are excluded from our attempt to accompany refugees worldwide. Pedro Arrupe, our founder, he called us to give everything we have and to share everything we have with refugees in need. There cannot be an exclusion to this. And this figure, the 108 million persons, represent today's challenges of injustice, simply and plainly. And we are called to discover God's presence in this world. The second point for me to this question would be, yes, there is also a limit to JRS's growth. And the limit is wherever we can no longer enter into this relationship of accompaniment, where we can no longer really be with people, then I think we would have lost our raison d'être, no? And we have failed our mission. No matter what the good reason would be, JRS would lose its mission, in my opinion. And the third consideration is, I think we would be looking for something I would call an organic growth. That means we discover and we renew our mission by learning from each other in a discerning way, not just by planning top-down. Where does this transformative relationship with refugees take us when we really share the values that are life-giving to them and to us? I think, and that's again with big gratitude to you, Tom, we are now in a position to ask these questions, because we have gained the organizational strength and we have gained the thematic focus that allows us to pose those questions and to ask, what does this mean for a next step in the development of a global ministry of the Society of Jesus? In 2024, next year, we are going to embark on a first step in this new journey, because we have to develop a new strategic framework. My hope is that we will be able to engage not only regional offices and international offices, as was the case last time for this framework of orientation, which was the first of its kind. I think we also need to find a way to include the country offices and the experiences that are made at that level in order to bring us to the next organizational step. In very short terms, maybe your years, Tom, were years to build the organization in a way that we can adequately respond to the size and the challenge we feel today. The next step may be to create on this basis new relationships of mission, and we have plenty of opportunities to do this. I look forward to sharing with you a few more points, but only in the garden and only after the drinks, and with a little bit of food. So I thank you very much at this stage for your patience and for your listening. And I really thank you for being part of this mission.
We've reached the end of our event. Yay. Thank you for your continued support of JRS. Together, we accompany, serve, and advocate. A warm thanks to all of our presenters today who have offered inspiring insights into how we are channeling hope in the most challenging and forgotten parts of the world. As we mentioned before, we'll share with you a link to the annual report after this. We'll also share the recording of this event for those who would like to share it with others, for those who'd like to watch it again, and for anyone who was unable to be with us today. And just last words of have a lovely evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you're calling in from. And for those of you here present, we very much look forward to seeing you in the garden.
Asante sana.
Tashakar.
Thank you.
Shukriya.
Kalome.
Merci.
Shukran.
The garden is just around the corner. So if
Follow the crowd.
exactly.